Hello and welcome back to this video. Now, in the last video we learned what the interface of Power BI looks like, so we had a little tour, but now let's actually dive into it. So let's practice. At first, there's a pop-up window and you can see I have opened up the complete new Power BI report. So let me actually close this here and let's actually import data here. As I said, in our first exercise here we want to import Excel data, so you can either click on here to import data from Excel, or you can go up here, Excel, or you simply go to Get Data, Excel, or the fourth option would be to go to More, and then also wait until the window opens, this pop-up window, and then choose Excel from here. So all ways would do exactly the same. So for me, I simply click on Excel up there, so import data from Microsoft Excel workbook, and by the way, you find this workbook also in the resource section of the course. So download the Excel file first to follow along. So if I go to Excel here, then I can choose my Power BI the easy way. So if I click on this and then I click on Open, what you see is I connect now to this file, and what will happen is a new window will appear. Just a second, and there it is. This is a so-called navigator. The navigator now allows us to specify what exactly do we want to have. And here I have two tables. Or actually I have a sheet which is called Gaming here, and also have a table which is called Gaming TBL. And you see that the data itself, if you click on it, let me maybe make this a little bit bigger for you. So this is what the data looks like. So if you open the Excel file, you see exactly this kind of data here, like country, price, order amount, sales, product, profit, and region. And if I click on the gaming here, this option, you see exactly the same data. So why is that? So this here, this little icon refers to the sheet of this Excel file, the gaming sheet. This, on the other hand, refers to a table. So if you have created a table of data in the sheet, then you will see here the little table icon, which differs because it has a little blue header line. And this allows us to only import the data on this specific table. So that's exactly the difference between those two. Because let's say you have this gaming sheet created in your underlying data source, so in the Excel file, but on the gaming sheet there's additional information. So you have additional data which you do not want to import into Power BI. Now, of course, you can still clean it with the Power Query Editor. We'll cover this in the next couple of videos. But why importing all the data and then clean it if you don't need it? Simply choose only the table you want to have and only import the table. So this allows you to make sure that even if someone else or you will change your Excel file in the future, the specific sheet, as long as this table still exists and you have only imported the table, you will only import the data from the table and avoid importing additional information you don't want. So that is why a best practice, at least from my point of view and experience, is choose the table. Just in case the data in this table is enough for you. Choose the table. So that is that. But in our case, it wouldn't make any difference if we tick this one option, let me then untick this one, or if we untick this one and tick this one. But because I think it's best practice, if you have a table and you only want to have the data from the table, choose the table here. As soon as you've done this, you can then also here refresh the data. This is also available here, by the way. This would mean that just in the meantime, you connect to the data, and in this specific moment, someone is changing the underlying data source. Then you could simply click refresh here, and you would see immediately the changes. So the data file itself is not locked, normally at least. Someone can edit it, and you can then click on refresh, and you would see the latest refresh of the data. And finally, if you want to load the data, there are two options here, which is load, which is already highlighted in yellow. That is why probably most people will click on it. But there's also this transform data. This transform data would mean that we do not load the data directly into Power BI. Instead, what we do is we open the Power Query Editor. As I've told you, this is the data cleaning and transformation tool which is available for us in Power BI, and we will cover this, as I promised, in the next couple of videos. But you could simply shape and clean your data up front before you load it into Power BI. This is where you can click on Transform Data, and then the Query Editor would open. For us now, for the simple file, we simply click on Load. Because we have seen the data here, the data looks fine to us. We also specified that we want to have the table, and then we click on simply on Load, import the data. Just a second, and you can see that Power BI is connecting to the data and is importing the data. Now it's done, and we can see on the fields list on the side that now we have our gaming table here, right? And you can see storage mode, latest refresh, and so on. And you can see all the different kinds of fields we have inside, like country, order amount, price, product, profit, region, and sales. So all these fields here are exactly the column headers in the underlying data source. You also see a little, well, sum icon here. That simply refers to the fact that if Power BI specifies a specific column as numeric column, then it will automatically create a sum here. It will automatically, also when you create a visualization based on this, you will automatically get the total profit, for instance here, the total sum of this column, or the total sales, if you want. If you want to have a look at the data, this is where, remember, there are different kinds of views in Power BI, also this data view here, and if you click on it, you also see here the table again, with the country, price, order amount, sales, product, profit, and region. So exactly that. Exactly the same table as in Excel could be viewed here in this data view. And under, just that you see it, under the model view, there we currently have one specific table here, which is there. We can't connect it to any other kind of data because we don't have it. But for now, that's not necessary. What I will do is I'll simply go back up here to my first view, and you see build visuals with your data. So what we need to do when we want to create or visualize something now, please tick the specific field we want. So we can either click first on a visualization, like let's say we would like to have a bar chart here. I can click on a bar chart, click on it, then I can see my template, and then I could simply click on sales, for instance. I can tick this here, and then what I see is I see a little bar chart here, which, by the way, I can drag around and place it anywhere, right? Or make it bigger if I want. But you see that this would be one way to first select here a specific template. Let me actually remove this, press delete to remove it when you select it. So specific template, like once here, or here the donut chart, click on it, and then you simply click the fields you want. For instance, sales here, and you can see that now this donut chart is filled with the sales value, which is almost 34,000. Now the other way would be that you can simply tick a specific field. And the difference is when I tick sales here, so I simply tick it instead of using a visualization up front, then by default I get a bar chart, as you can see here. And this is true for all numerical fields. So if I click somewhere on my blank canvas and then choose another field, like for instance profit, click on it, I will see that again I get here a bar chart. So this is the default chart which could get created if you use a numerical field. Also make sure that if you want to create a new chart, a new visualization, first click somewhere on a blank canvas. Because if I click on the profit, if it's still selected like this, and then I choose another kind of visualization in the visualizations pane, for instance, I'd say I like to see a pie chart, click on pie chart, then you see that you change the specific visual. So if you want to change a visual, simply select it and then choose a different kind of visualization here. That works. But if you do not want to change it, just make sure that you first click somewhere on the blank canvas, so you untick or unselect all the visuals you have, and then choose another, here field you want, or choose another visualization to create a specific template and then fill in with the fields. Okay? Besides these options here, we also have text fields, like for instance country here is text field currently, or product or region. So if I click on product here, what you see is that by default, Power BI is creating a table. So for text fields, Power BI is always by default creating tables, like this one here. Now, if you want to add additional data to the table, here for instance, I would like to see my product here, as I can see here, which is here a unique list of products. Because if I take a look at my data here, you see that for the products here, we have several times PlayStation which have been sold, or Xbox, or Nintendo, and so on, or PC down there. But what Power BI gives us here is simply a unique list, so distinct values of these products. And then we can add additional data to this specific visualization. So for in this case to the table, for instance, we'd like to see the sales amount for each product. Then what we could do is either we select this option here and drag it here under values, because you can see in values here is currently only product. We can drop it here, and then what we get is we get the sum of sales for each product. And in total, this around 34,000 euros or dollars, whatever kind of currency it is. You can see the same if you hover over the bar. This is exactly the same amount as the total sales. But now here simply for each product. The same is true for the profit. So if you drag the profit then in your table and drop it somewhere here, you get additional information here for the profit, for instance, for each product. So the same is true like that. If you want to remove something, you simply click on a little cross symbol here. Click on cross here, and now you can see that the profit is gone. Another way to add data to here, this table, is instead of dragging and dropping it like this, you can also simply tick it. So if you click on this tick option here, you also see that Power BI is simply adding the data down there to the table. If you want to change the order, simply choose profit here and drag it on top of sales. Drag and drop it, and now you can see that the profit is the first column next to the product and the sales is the last one. So by simply dragging and dropping them around, you can adjust the order. If you want to remove something, simply click on this little cross symbol here. And if you want to do additional things, click on the down arrow, and there you can also see different kinds of options, like what kind of aggregation do you want to have? Do you want to have the sum? Do you want to have the average, minimum, and so on? These options are also available for you here. But that's it for creating a table. So by default, remember that if you do not choose a specific visual up front and then add your data to it, by default, Power BI will create bar charts for numerical data and tables for, in this case, text data. And each of those visuals, like for instance the bar chart here, the pie chart, as well as here, this chart here, the table, is completely customizable. What I mean by that is currently here, we are in actually the field option here, right? If you hover it, you can see the fields. Now next to the fields here, there's also this formatting option. I call it the paintbrush, but this is only my personal naming for that. So if you click this, what you see is then you have additional options to style your table. So, and here I would highly recommend that you go through all these options and try them out. So under styling, for instance, you could see there are different kinds of styles. So if I go to alternating rows, click on this, then you see that the table changes, the style of the table. And here simply try out what's available and what fits best your needs. Right? Click on sparse and then we'll look at that. So for me, that's a bit too much. That's why if you want to go back, so you can always click on this revert to default, which is available, and then you can see the original table. So for me, that's fine, but I just want to encourage you, try out the different kinds of styles there are. And the same is true for other things. For the grid, for instance, do you want to add additional grids? So maybe you can see this on your screen. Now I added a vertical grid line. I can untick this or tick this. I can also adjust the color. If you go here, you see that I make this blue, then I would have a blue color for that. So everything in the visual is customizable. You just need to take a look at here this formatting, or what I call paintbrush option here. And there are a lot of things, so just in case you do not find something immediately, go to the search option and search for it. So column headers, the same is true here. You can adjust the font size, the background color, and so on. The text size here, so if I make this bigger, you see that now I'm creating bigger headers here in my table. Right? The same is true for the values, so in case the values are too small for you, go with this values option here. Click on values here, adjust the font, background color, and so on, or simply only the size. You can go in here and adjust the size. You can also, by the way, simply highlight this and then type in a number, like 15, and then you can see that the number here gets bigger. So totally up to you how you want to do that. And there's also always this revert option, which is also available for you. Simply if you want to go back to the default settings. And under totals, this would of course refer to this total here, so the last line in your table, which again is also customizable. So here I just wanted to highlight this, try it out yourself, go through all the options which are available for you. I just want to show you a few of them right now. And one good thing, at least from my point of view, is simply as soon as you're done, collapse it back again, because there's so many options, and if you do not do that, then you need to scroll a lot. So that is why choose what you want and then simply collapse it back like that, and then you have a little more space in here. Don't need to scroll too much. Under conditional formatting, you can tick this here as well. Then you can see you can specify what you want to format. So the product, the profit, or the sales. So for instance, let's go with the sales numbers here, and then you can see you can adjust different things here, like the background color. You can turn this on, and then of course you can go on the advanced controls here, click on this one, and then you can see additional things here. Like if you want to adjust the background color for the sales, you can see that currently they are like that, simply because here you can specify now the color scale, apply to values only, or values and totals. If you do that, then of course it will also change for the totals. Needs to be a few settings here, but this is also something you can specify here. So how you want to actually adjust here the specific table to your needs. You can play around with the colors here. So if I make this, for instance, orange here, like this one, and now if I would apply this, if I click OK here, need to fill out the fields, sorry, enter value, minimum, let's say the minimum here is 6,000 here, like that, and the maximum value here, specify this for, let's say, 11,000 for now. And if you now click OK here, you would see that now you get a different kind of color here. So this is something you can adjust here under the advanced controls. So based on what kind of field do you want to base this on, in this case currently it's the sum of the sales, which is turned to the sales field. or you can also choose another kind of field. Also interesting, because you basically could, even depending on whether it makes sense or not, but you could format here the sales based on another field. So I can, for instance, format the sales based on the profit. This could also be an option, because maybe I have a lot of sales, but the profit itself is low for a specific product. That could also be done here. And diverging, you can tick this here, then you can see that the color is a little adjusting, and you also have a center color here. But this is something you can simply adjust exactly the way you want it here for different kinds of, in this case, as you can see here, different kinds of columns in your table. And so that would be an option for that. Let me untick this here for now, simply to go back. This would be the font color, or the background color. You can do the same for the font color. So this would here simply format the font color. Even though currently now you can see the 6050, you can't even see anymore. So there you would have to try a little bit a different color. So that is why I don't use the font color. What's more interesting, at least for me, is for instance the data bars. So if I click on data bars here, you can see that now you have some kind of data bars, which also allow you here to highlight what kind of, in this case, what kind of sales here are more higher than others. So this could be an interesting background. But of course, you don't have to use it. It's just an option I can show you here. And other things are icons and web URL. So if you go to icons here, you can see those icons like these ones here, which you can also adjust here in your table. So a lot of options here available for you. And as I said, try them out yourself and see what works for you, right? And the other things are, some of them are kind of self-explanatory. So the background, do you want to change the color for the background of your table? Do you want to change border for your table? Do you want to apply this? Do you want to apply a shadow? If I click on the shadow option here, you can see that now for the visual, there we have this shadow effect here. Also, maybe this is something you want to do here with your visuals itself. Could also be applied here. And always, if you want to remove something, simply untick it, and then you can see the original view back, right? So these are the options here. And as I said before, depending on what kind of visual you choose, so if I take this one here, for instance, the bar chart, then I would see different options here for formatting, right? So data colors, for instance, here the data labels, interesting. If I tick this, then I would see the data label up there, right? Which also can then be formatted. So just let me show it to you. Data label here for the display units. Currently it's set to auto, and you can also see, maybe a little bit small, but you can see 34K currently. If you do not want to see the K, you want to see the complete number, simply go here and say none. And then what you see here is now it states 34,200. So you can also adjust here the different kinds of display units. Auto simply would refer to the best, which Power BI thinks is the best, but it's also something you can adjust here. If you have bigger numbers, then might be the abbreviation for millions or billions or even trillions could be interesting. And you, of course, you can play around with the color as well as the position itself, and also the text size here. So if I make here this also 15, you see that now this number is bigger. But as I said, the main idea here is really that you can adjust this for any kind of visual you have. Simply select the visual, because then you have the option to go to the specific formatting option here and then adjust the specific formats for each of those visualizations. Okay? So this is that for that. Okay, so that was it for the tables as well as for instance, the bar chart. Maybe one last thing here is the country. Now, the country is actually a geographical field. So that is why if I simply click on country here, what you see is that Power BI is creating a map for me automatically. So Power BI is smart enough here to recognize that this is a geographical field, so these country names, and that is why it's creating those country names here directly and plot them on a map. It's different from the table itself. Even though I could select the visual, always remember that you can change any visual. You simply select it first. Now the map is selected, and then if I would like to have a table, I can always go click on table here, and then I would see a unique list of my countries here. It's currently sorted in alphabetical order. But if I go back to my this map visualization, I can see dots on a map. And just in case you do not, or this is not working for you, because sometimes click on the sometimes if you click on this, and even though you have a country, it does not display the country. It simply refers to the table because it thinks it's simply a string. It's not a country. So if this is not working for you, what you could do is you simply first select it. So as I said, I clicked on the country here. So let me actually show it one more time. Currently, you can see on the top ribbon bar, there are the normal ribbons. But if you tick a specific, in this case, a specific column of your table, click on country, you see that now there are two additional fields, which is the table tools as well as the column tools. And under column tools, there is actually the option here under data category, Currently it's uncategorized, but you can click on this and then change it to something. For instance, in our case, this would be country. There's also continent, latitude, longitude, postal code, and so on. So you can change the data type. And sometimes it works for people that you first need to select country here, instead of leaving it uncategorized. And you will also see that if I tick country here, let me tick it, you see that now a little globe icon appears here. This is referring to the fact that Power BI is treating this field now as a geographical dimension. The reason why I want to highlight this is here is really the following, that I have seen for some students that if you leave it as uncategorized, then the visualization works, as it does for me. And for some, they had to use at first convert it into a geographical field. So notice, click on the field itself, go to the column tools, and under column tools here, change the data category to country, just in case the uncategorized doesn't work for you. So for the map, always remember, for each visual, simply check out what is under format. Because for the map, for instance, we also see not only here category, which is currently turned off, I can turn this on, and then I would see also the country names here, which, at least from my point of view, already looks better than without the names. And then we can also go to the bubbles here, and the bubbles allow us to increase the bubble size. So for instance, I can make this bigger, like that, right? That's already interesting, but what I currently see here is I can see bubbles, but they all have the same size. So maybe, and this is probably the case, that you also see this here for different kinds of products, but it also be true for the countries. For each country, we have different kinds of sales. So what if we like to connect the size of the bubble to the specific sales figure in this country? Then we can go back to the first view, the fields view, and then we see that under here we have country put in the location. We have a legend, a latitude, longitude, and also a size here. So if we drag the sales now into the size, drag and drop it, like that, you see that now we have different kinds of bubble sizes based on the sales in a specific country. And now, from my point of view, now the bubbles are a little bit too big for me, so I go back to the formatting option and go back to my bubbles here and say I'd like to reduce the size here. Maybe either use a slider, or you can simply go inside and type in some value in here. Let's try out 10 and see that the bubbles now shrink a little bit, right? So also something we can adjust here for the bubble sizes. So this is an option which we can then use in order to highlight actually the different kinds of sales numbers for the specific kind of countries in our map. And there's one other option I'd like to show you here, because a few of those settings like title, background, and so on, these are actually available for all the visuals. But there are certain kinds of options here under the formatting which are only relevant for a specific visual. For instance, for the map, we have the bubbles, as well as the bubble size, right? Here. But we also have, next to that, this heat map option. So you can go on heat map here, and then instead of bubbles, you can see heat maps. And again, you'd go to heat map here, and then you can play around with the radius as well as the units here. So if you set the radius, let's say, try out maybe 50, right? And you can see now the heat map itself is already bigger here. So this is something you need to play around with. There's no best practice, it's simply trial and error, and maybe a little bit experience when you use this heat map. So let me untick this for now and go back to my bubbles. Just wanted to show you that that's available for you as well. And another thing which I like to point out here for the map, well, the last thing here is actually the map styles. Because some people like the default map, some people don't like it. Then if you do not like it, simply go under theme, here under map styles, and try out the other themes which are available for you. For instance, Arial would look like that, or there's also dark, which look like that, and so on. So these are the themes or fields which are available by default for Power BI for this specific map visual here. If we go back to road, this is the default one, the original one. And always, if you do not like your changes, you have always the option to revert to default, simply to go back. Okay, so that's actually it for the first part here, just to explore what's available for us. In the next part, we will create our first report. So stay tuned for that.